Okay, so fresh off of UFC, ESPN, Wichita. It's all 5 rounds coming to you, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about something I've had a conversation with a couple of times with a few people, and that's my overall take after UFC Wichita. Great fights on the card, but what I really want to talk about and what really sticks out to me, and it stuck out to me before the card started, and that was the main event with Derrick Lewis and Junior Dos Santos. Junior Dos Santos obviously is elite when it comes to the heavyweight division. His 3 battles with Kane are, undeniable part of UFC and MMA history. And he's put on amazing fight after amazing fight. His skill level is extremely high when it comes to boxing and groundwork. His wrestling has, drastically improved as well. Subsequently, because of having to fight Kane, I believe, 3 times. He always had the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but the wrestling has really elevated. And I just want to talk about where Derrick Lewis fits in. I know a lot of places have him ranked as the 3rd best heavyweight in the division. To me, that just signifies how weak the heavyweight division is right now. It's not in a good place. Derrick Lewis, and I don't want to seem like I'm coming off bashing anybody. I mean, he's in the UFC, so obviously he's a good MMA fighter. But to me, Derrick Lewis doesn't have the skill set of somebody in the top 5. The things that are glaring strengths about him are things that aren't really skills but are more attributes. He's got great power. He is tremendously tough, and those things can never be taken away from Derrick Lewis. If there was, top pound for pound tough guy in the UFC, he's in there. He's extremely tough and very durable. But when it comes to fighting polished fighters, he looks out of his element. He doesn't have the striking skill set to stand with them. He doesn't have the wrestling skill set to keep a fight standing. He's just not there yet. And, I think the question is, what do you do with Derrick Lewis? He knocks out a lot of guys. His record speaks for itself. But when it comes to elite competition, he just doesn't have what it takes at this point in his career. Not saying that couldn't change. As he continues to work on his striking, his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, all that can change, and I don't doubt that, and I'm sure he's putting in the work to do that. But I think it's just such a big leap for him at this time to step in there with a guy like Daniel Cormier, who already has so much wrestling behind him at such a high level, and has over the last how many years just been putting everything together. With his striking and wrestling, his jiu-jitsu. Junior's, in that same boat. I mean, when I saw that fight, I was like, Derrick Lewis has almost no chance at winning. I just never saw where I'm like, he could maybe wing a punch. That was my only thought process, was that he could maybe wing a haymaker of some sort and catch him. And when that's your only chance at, looking at winning a fight, that doesn't sit well. It doesn't sit well with me when I'm watching a fight. I want to see 2 guys who are, wickedly competitive, go back and forth. I want to hear people debate about who wins if it goes to a decision. Who took what round, why, let's go over positioning, let's go over octagon control, let's go over striking, who's the aggressor, but is the other guy countering? Is that his strategy? I wanna have those discussions about fights, during and afterwards. Uh, and even before, I'd like, speculation. But when I saw Junior and Derrick Lewis, I'm like, well, Derrick Lewis has one chance, and it's very small. And you know, it was extremely evident just watching when I'm watching Junior Dos Santos angle off and taking side angles on strikes, and Derrick is standing still, flat-footed, throwing one shot. No combinations, not trying to work off a jab. You don't have much of a chance against an elite fighter like Junior Dos Santos, whose boxing skills are, extremely high for the UFC heavyweight division. You're talking about a guy who's in the past trained with the boxing team in Brazil, that goes to the Olympics. Like, if your striking's not up to par, you better have good wrestling, and he didn't, and it spells disaster, I think. And I think the UFC has to really look and see what they're going to do with Derrick Lewis. I think he'd be a good gatekeeper for the top 5 guys. So if you have an emerging, UFC heavyweight who's trying to crack into the top 5, I think you got to go through Derrick Lewis, to prove that you've got what it takes. Aside from that, and I mean, Derrick Lewis could do that for a long time. I'm sure the UFC would love to keep him around because he puts on exciting fights. He knocks guys out, and I guess you never know. There's always that element of you never know with Derrick Lewis because he could pull it off. But aside from that, I think we need to keep him out of the fights with the Junior Dos Santos, the Cain Velasquez, the Daniel Cormiers of the world, and Ngannou's. I think these guys have all made massive strides in their MMA game at this point, and they're just far ahead of where Derrick Lewis is. But keep him there because he puts exciting fights on, and people want to see him fight. And he's hilarious when he gets on the mic. So his personality, bodes well with the UFC. I think that's, for me, where it lies with Derrick Lewis. And as far as Junior Dos Santos goes, does he get an immediate title shot? I don't know if he gets an immediate title shot. I wouldn't mind seeing him fighting Ngannou. I don't think I ever want to see him and Cain fight again. And if they go straight to Daniel Cormier and him, I'm not upset with that. To me, that makes a whole lot more sense than Daniel Cormier, Brock Lesnar. I know there's a lot of talk about that, and I mean, there's another guy who doesn't deserve to be fighting in the top 5. The guy, basically cheated to fight and beat Mark Hunt, who wasn't, I don't believe, in the top 5 at that time. So Brock certainly does not deserve to come in and get his ass kicked by Daniel Cormier for a big payday. I mean, Brock will get a big payday either way. It'll be even bigger if it's against the heavyweight champion, obviously. But if anybody wants to know how that fight's going to go down, just watch Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar, and it'll be a similar finish. Brock has no chance. So, hopefully that is not what transpires. If it does, I won't be shocked because the UFC's into making money and not necessarily doing what's the right fight. However, I'd much prefer Junior Dos Santos and Daniel Cormier over Brock Lesnar, Daniel Cormier. If Brock wants to come back to the UFC and fight, so be it. I mean, he's good entertainment value. But there's guys in the lower ranks. I'd even prefer, if you really want to have one of those fights just to see if who belongs where or what, let's do Derrick Lewis and Brock Lesnar. I'm okay with that. I think we all get a sense of what kind of fight that would be, and it could go either way. So I'd be okay with that. But I don't know. We'll see what the UFC does. They're into making money. so that fight may or may not transpire. But anyways, just wanted to give my brief sort of thoughts on UFC Wichita, and that was the main thing that stuck out to me about the card and about the matchmaking for it. So anyways, if you guys ever have any comments about anything that I talk about, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Darren Laux. I'm also on Facebook as well, Darren Laux, and feel free to comment, DM me, whatever you want to do, and and we can always chat. Anyways, this is me just signing off. All 5 rounds, UFC Wichita on ESPN. Thanks.